We're following breaking news this morning. President Trump suggesting earlier this morning delaying the election over mail-in ballots and possible fraud concerns. Legal analyst Wendy joining us now. Wendy, good morning.
Good morning, Raul.
To say this was a bombshell threw everybody in a tizzy this morning with this tweet. The president does not have the power alone to do this, correct?
Correct. And there is absolutely no indication that Congress is going to change the date of the election. Raul, this is something that has been floated over the last couple of months, obviously in connection with the pandemic and the way that it's impacted voting in so many different states. But Attorney General Barr, I think, really advanced the argument this week when, in response to being asked about voter fraud, he didn't say that mail-in ballot increases fraud necessarily. He basically said it increases the risk of some type of voting fraud. Seems like the president has seized upon that to now put forth an argument that that might be a basis for delaying the election. Because remember back in April, when this was raised by Joe Biden, the president said, absolutely not, we're going forward November 3rd. Now it seems that things have changed, and one wonders whether that's in response to the congressional testimony or whether in response to his poll numbers, which of course is the other speculation.
There's no evidence that there's fraud in mail-in voting, unsubstantiated allegations, like let's call them that. Doesn't the president mail in vote as well? So the reasoning behind this is what? Because now the concern is, well, is he trying to illegitimize the actual election, or what is the goal here?
Well, the goal appears to raise the issue because, you know, the president is notorious for raising issues on social media and then looking at the way public sentiment is expressed in response. He's been doing that throughout his presidency. So it's not necessarily the case that he intends to try to move the date of the election because, as you mentioned, he doesn't have that power. Congress sets that date. But it is also true that there are issues when, because of the pandemic, our options for voting are more limited. And it is also true, at least in theory, although you are correct, we don't have the kind of numbers evidence-wise we would like, that there could be more of a risk if you're mailing in your ballots instead of actually going to a polling place. So those are the two sides of the, we'll call these the dueling narratives surrounding the propriety of even discussing the fact that the election might be moved. But Raul, we're 96 days out, and there's no serious chance of that date being changed as of yet. The president is simply making headlines by suggesting that it might be a good idea. But then the question becomes, okay, until when? Until there's a vaccine? Until we don't, I mean, people are going to mail in their ballots whether or not the pandemic goes away. I mean, it's more convenient. Like you said, the president probably does the same thing. Some states have been that's their primary method of voting and have been for years. So it seems like it might just be more of raising the issue than actually a serious intention on his part to actually try to make it happen.
I think this has forced a lot of people into a crash course in Article 2 of the Constitution that explains all of this further. In terms of distracting from other things going on, is that the goal perhaps here? Or we're just trying to wrap our brains around what dropping this, it's almost like the kids like to say, I'm just going to leave this here and then walk away and see what happens.
Well, I would probably think it has something to do with being corroborated by some of the testimony that William Barr gave this week on the one hand.
Sure.
On the other hand, it's also true that it is a distraction. But remember, the president has long been opposed to mail-in ballots, to mail-in voting. So this isn't something he simply came up with today to distract the country from our, like you say, our more pressing issues going on. And there are also lots of people who agree that the risk, not necessarily that there's evidence to back this up, but the risk of voter fraud could be increased if you mail in your ballots. So, you know, it's not that it's a bad faith effort on his part to simply distract, but by virtue of it coming when it does, obviously it's going to be a bit of a distraction. And he had to have realized that before he said what he did, because he already knows, given his platform on Twitter, anything he says, particularly when it has to do with the upcoming election, is going to be picked up exactly as it was today. And we're all going to be talking about it because it's important.
Oh, that's the power of a tweet coming from the president of the United States. Anything you say carries a lot more weight. I'm curious as to what reporters are going to be asking the president throughout the day if he makes himself available, because it was open-ended, the tweet. It's not delay until...
Or if he backtracks, Raul, because
or if he
walks it back much of the time after he's had a chance to absorb some of the public sentiment, which doesn't seem to be on the side of delaying the election.
Because in the tweet, it seems like it's open-ended. It's not like he's going to delay it until May of 2021. It said specifically, delay the election until people can properly, securely, and safely vote. In lawyer speak, that thing's open-ended.
Yeah, no, that will never happen. We will never be a country where we delay elections indefinitely. We may delay some things indefinitely, but definitely not a presidential election. And there is no intention. He has no intention of doing that. Remember, just in April, he was absolutely set on that being the date. So it appears that between then and now, some of the developments, particularly the pushing back of the date in which we'll be safe to go out and about, that probably has something to do with it as well. But Raul, I wouldn't be surprised if he modifies those comments when he's interviewed about it, no doubt later today.
Is there a method to the madness here?
I think so. He's trying to draw attention to his concerns that voter fraud is a problem. The further question is, will that then extend after the election if he's not successful? Remember, that's been a topic of consternation among commentators on both sides for the last couple of weeks. So he could be setting that up one way or another. We'll have to wait and see. But it will also depend on what he says, how he clarifies those comments, because he had to have known he was going to make a splash when he said that tweet.
A splash? It's more like a tidal wave.
Understatement of the day, I know.
Let's put our political professor hats on right now. You are now the leadership in the Senate. You are now the Republican Party, the leadership in the Republican Party. How do you react to this when everybody asks you what your thoughts are on the president's tweet this morning? What does Mitch McConnell say?
Everyone in Congress has to react. They have to react the same way. It's their call when to hold the election. And they would need an absolutely astronomically good reason to move it, and they don't have one, particularly because they don't have the evidence to support the enhanced risk of voter fraud. If there were that evidence, that would be maybe something they can work with, but they would never get the votes as it is. So they'll probably just maintain, the federal law gives Congress the power to set the date of the election, and we've done it. That's why that's why I predict he's going to have to at least modify or walk back a little bit what he said. He may basically express, he was just expressing the kind of reservations he's always had over voter fraud and the danger of mail-in ballots.
And I think the follow-up tweet, which makes it a little bit more bizarre, was support patio pizza in Long Island, New York. That was the last tweet. So,
okay.
All that, and then, go get a slice of pie.
Explain it. That's right.
Wendy, thank God you're here. That's all I got to say.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Raul.
Thank you.